Or good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for joining me on this call, and I apologize for postponing the call by a week. We were quite deep in our negotiations with both our debenture holders and regarding Cepline, and it made more sense to delay the call as we tried to resolve both matters. Before we begin, I would like to remind our listeners that my remarks may state management's intentions, hopes, beliefs, expectations, or projections of the future, including, without limitation, those regarding clinical trial timelines, presentation of results, and partnering plans. These are forward-looking statements that involve risks and uncertainties. Forward-looking statements on this call are made pursuant to the safe harbor provisions of federal securities laws. These forward-looking statements are based on the company's current expectations, and actual results could differ materially. Accordingly, you should not place undue reliance on any forward-looking statements. Some of the risk factors that could cause actual results to differ materially from those contemplated by such forward-looking statements are discussed in the periodic reports that the company files with the SEC. These documents are available in the investor section of the company's website, and we encourage you to review these documents carefully. One note, I will not directly be addressing the forthcoming shareholder vote because of SEC regulations. However, the matters I am discussing are, of course, important for shareholders to know and consider. Before discussing this morning's Cepline announcement, I would like to discuss the May convertible debenture. This debenture was designed to be a bridge financing that the company entered into in May 2018 with the objective of paying the loan back with the proceeds of a larger financing to be completed over the summer. This larger financing never happened, and the delisting from NASDAQ triggered a default in the notes. When I was appointed interim CEO, these notes were in default, and we were able to negotiate with the debenture holders for a waiver of the default and an agreement that allowed the October financing to take place. At the time, and as you have no doubt seen from our 10Q filing, the company had very little cash left in the bank and few options. Since then, as we completed our proxy statement, 10Q filing, and the registration statement for the October 2018 financing, we also engaged in further negotiations with the 9 funds holding the debentures to try to extend the maturity date of the loan and therefore avoid multiple consequences, including the potential conversion of shares that we do not have available to issue, causing the company to incur additional damages, and the occurrence of a so-called trigger event in the October 18 debenture, which creates a higher interest rate, lowers the conversion price on interest, and removes the company's right to redeem the debenture early. Although we did reach agreements with several of the debenture holders, there are ongoing discussions and negotiations with others, and unfortunately we were not able to come to an agreement with all of the debenture holders to extend the maturity of the note. We have continued to negotiate with them and will continue to do so. I had hoped that this could have been resolved last week, and then after delaying the call, had hoped that by yesterday all 9 would have agreed to extend, but we did not get there yet. We are continuing to try to come to a solution that will buy us more time with these notes, as we clearly do not have the funds at the moment to repay the debt, nor do we have the stock available to issue upon conversions. Moreover, we are vigorously disputing the claim made by certain debenture holders that this default results in an additional set of liquidated damages. We will provide updates on the status of the negotiations to extend the maturity of these notes when there are any material changes. I want to address one specific issue relating to the company's financings that has been brought to my attention. All of our financings since I have been at the company, and by that I don't mean to imply otherwise about any prior transactions, but I was not here, so I'm not personally familiar with them. But none of these transactions were done with all of these transactions were done with institutional investors or accredited individual investors, none of whom can be considered insiders of the company. Let me state this very clearly. No employee or board member of the company participated in or would have been allowed to participate in these financings. No employee or board member of this company benefits in any way from a declining share price. These matters all relate directly to the problem that the company has with an inadequate authorized share count. In order to finance the company going back many years, Immune has sold various kinds of convertible securities, either preferred stock or debt, which convert into common shares that the company must issue. Often these have adjustable conversion prices. Many of you have referred to these securities as toxic, as they can result in substantial dilution to existing shareholders in the face of a falling stock price and a reset of the conversion price. These deals also, at least sometimes, allow companies to avoid bankruptcy, to complete clinical studies, develop products, or get partnering deals done. These types of financings are very common in the small and microcap biotech space, where companies do not often have the luxury of high valuations, elevated share prices, or product revenues to support other kinds of financings. The company currently has 225 million shares authorized to issue, about 50 million of which are issued. The remaining shares are not enough to satisfy our current obligation. Between our Series E convertible preferred, the May convertible debentures, and the October convertible debenture, we are potentially obligated to issue to those investors far more shares than 225 million. This is a problem for the company, as there are severe financial damages that we are exposed to when we cannot deliver shares upon a conversion request. It is the presence of these securities in our capital structure and on our balance sheet that convinced me in September that a bertolumab partnership was the only answer for the company, because only a bertolumab partnership has the potential to bring in enough capital to pay off the notes and avoid the issuance of potentially hundreds of millions of Immune shares. So it is my most fervent hope that Immune never needs to issue hundreds of millions of shares of stock, that a bertolumab transaction will allow us to pay off a large portion or even all of the convertible debt. It is only in this way that we can expect some normalization of the stock price, as we know there is persistent selling pressure on Immune's shares as holders of these securities convert shares and sell. Now I'd like to turn to the Cephalene transaction that we announced this morning, which is a great deal for Immune. In 2017, we reacquired rights to Cephalene outside of North and South America from Meta for $5 million plus some future sales milestones. With the strategic refocus away from oncology and the decision to divest the oncology assets in May of this year, we sought to divest this program. Since July, several parties have expressed interest in acquiring European or worldwide Cephalene rights, and we have been in negotiations with two serious counterparties since then. We are happy to have brought together an option deal that provides some modest short-term financing for the company and which will lead to a much larger transaction upon closing. The deal we signed with Vector Therapeutics gives them, in exchange for $500,000, the right to acquire global Cephalene rights from us for a total consideration that could exceed $17.5 million, depending on the precise extent of Cephalene-related liabilities assumed or paid by Vector. Most importantly, these terms feature non-contingent cash payments of $14.5 million through year-end 2022 and the satisfaction of the outstanding liabilities owed by Immune to Meta. Vector's option gives them the right to acquire Cephalene at these terms until January 31st, 2019, and they can extend that right for another month for an additional $100,000. The terms of the deal are quite attractive to Immune for several reasons. The upfront consideration, including the option payment, will result in $5 million coming into Immune by the end of Q1 2019, with the remaining $10 million coming in annual year-end payments in 2019 through 2022. The transaction will also result in the payment of our outstanding liabilities to Meta. The proceeds of this transaction will allow us to reduce some of our debts, both convertible notes and our payables and liabilities, and will support our operating expenses, including closing out the ulcerative colitis bertolumab study, as well as supporting bertolumab manufacturing. This deal also allows us to part with global Cephalene rights in a single transaction rather than regional rights. And as many of you know, Vector Therapeutics was founded and is headed by Immune's former CEO, Daniel Tepper, who has a deep understanding of Cephalene and its commercial potential. In order to execute the option, Vector must have adequate capital available to consummate the deal. If they are unable to exercise the option, we retain the $500,000 payment. We will be free to enter a transaction with another company. We believe this transaction is a win for both companies, and we will be working closely with Vector to try to achieve a speedy closing. I'd like to move on to discuss bertolumab. First, allow me to briefly highlight some of the additional data we have received from the BP01 study. The most important finding was the lack of any anti-bertolumab antibodies. It is commonly observed that some patients treated with monoclonal antibodies will over time develop antibodies against the treatment. This can, in some patients, reduce the effectiveness of the antibody or lead to allergic reactions to the antibody. Although the number of subjects is small, this is the first report from subjects exposed to multiple doses of berdalimumab, so we are quite pleased with the results. We are also gratified that the multi-dose pharmacokinetics observed in elderly bullous pemphigoid patients looks as expected based on the single-dose pharmacokinetics previously observed in young, healthy volunteers. The ulcerative colitis trial completed enrollment with a total of 57 screened subjects and 33 randomized. This was short of the initial goal of enrolling 42 into the study. Because this was a proof-of-concept study looking to detect a signal suggesting activity and was not designed to prove that berdalimumab is efficacious in treating ulcerative colitis, we had some flexibility to end the study early. And it became absolutely critical that we reserve some of the old process berdalimumab produced by Lonza for use in comparability studies with the new process berdalimumab that will be produced by WuXi Biologics, which I will discuss further in a moment. This is particularly critical because Lonza decommissioned its 200-liter bioreactor and can no longer manufacture berdalimumab for us, so our remaining supplies must be reserved for these comparability studies. We are going to push to unblind the ulcerative colitis study as quickly as possible. The last visit for the last subject is expected in early January, so we continue to believe that we should have the preliminary data by late Q1 or early Q2 2019. I will turn a moment to asthma. We announced this quarter the results of some asthma work that we are conducting in animal models, which are data that I am really excited about. I think the most important observation from these studies is that in this animal model of asthma, blocking eotaxin-1 appears to have a much broader anti-inflammatory effect than does blocking interleukin-5 or IL-5. Since 3 antibodies that block the activity of IL-5 have already been approved in the U.S. and Europe for the treatment of severe asthma in patients with high eosinophil counts, we think this suggests a profile that could be very competitive with those agents and possibly address a broader patient population. We plan to conduct additional studies in these asthma models. We plan to present the additional bullous pemphigoid data and the asthma results at scientific conferences in 2019, and we are just beginning to prepare the bullous pemphigoid data for publication as well. On to manufacturing. We have made excellent progress on the manufacturing front with our partner WuXi. As a reminder, all studies to date have been conducted with berdalimumab manufactured by Lonza using an NS0 line, which is a mouse cell line. We are switching to a Chinese hamster ovary, or CHO, cell line, a scalable cell line very commonly used in the production of monoclonal antibodies. WuXi completed the technology transfer by September and are already doing process optimization work, and we are seeing early yields from this work of 4 to 6 grams per liter. This far exceeds our expectation, as the yields we had seen with our prior CRO were in the range of 2.5 to 3.5 grams per liter. I'll note by comparison, yields observed with the NS0 cell line were approximately 1 gram per liter. We also have preliminary purification results that are very encouraging. Finally, on the formulation front, we have achieved concentrations of berdalimumab up to 100 milligrams per milliliter, which is 10 times higher than the concentration we have previously used. We will continue to push the concentration higher and believe this bodes well for the eventual development of a subcutaneous formulation. On to the clinical development and regulatory. We have received preliminary feedback from the FDA on a variety of critically important issues. We asked the FDA many questions on our manufacturing, preclinical, and clinical development plans. FDA was generally in agreement with our manufacturing and preclinical testing plans and offered some specific input on what kinds of studies would be needed to support a product approval. As we expected, given the substantive changes and improvements in our manufacturing process, the FDA will require a bridging pharmacokinetic study comparing Lonza-manufactured berdalimumab to WuXi-manufactured berdalimumab. We expect this to be a small single-dose study. with 12 to 15 subjects per arm. We had proposed to the FDA that they allow us to run this study in parallel with any other clinical trials, such as a pivotal bullous pemphigoid study, in order to allow a more speedy path to a pivotal study. But FDA has insisted that this study be run prior to further bullous pemphigoid trials. Fortunately, we expect it to be a quick study that will involve healthy volunteers and not patients. Also, the patient number and duration of exposure will be small. FDA also agreed in principle that a single pivotal study would be sufficient for approval of bullous pemphigoid, provided the study design is adequate, of course, and that we have conducted a proper dose-ranging study. The study design that we had submitted to FDA was for a large dose-ranging study that would also serve as a registrational study. We will revise the study design to accommodate the FDA's requests and the feedback that they gave us on the types of endpoints they would like us to look at in that trial. We believe that a two-stage or adaptive design study with a dose-ranging stage followed by a pivotal efficacy stage will satisfy all of the FDA requirements. We are already working with our biostatisticians to develop this revised study design. Our plan is, once we have more details on the revised study design, to next seek a scientific advice meeting in Europe in the first or second quarter of next year to get additional feedback on the clinical development plan in Europe, and then to bring a fully developed protocol back to the FDA and to EMA in the second or third quarter of next year. Because FDA is requiring us to complete the bridging PK study prior to further clinical work in bullous pemphigoid, we would expect to launch the bridging PK study immediately upon having drug available from WuXi. This could be as early as late 2019 or more likely first quarter of 2020. Then we will launch the pivotal BP study. We currently estimate that it will take about 6 months to run the bridging PK study. Accordingly, the launch of the pivotal BP study will be delayed by approximately 6 months in order to accommodate the FDA's insistence on bridging PK before launching the next BP study. As far as future studies in ulcerative colitis and asthma, we did not discuss other indications with the FDA since our meeting was about bullous pemphigoid. I would expect that from FDA's perspective, bridging PK will be required prior to the launch of those studies as well. In the ulcerative colitis indication, we would run the next study, a phase 2B trial, in conjunction with a partner, as that study is likely to be at least 200 subjects and involves 6 months of treatment. A proof-of-concept study in asthma, on the other hand, would be far more affordable as it would be smaller and have a shorter duration of administration. Depending on the nature of the partnership we achieve for berdalimumab, this could be a study that Immune runs or it could be a study run by a partner. As I mentioned on the September update call, we do not have time to wait in order to pursue a berdalimumab partnership. Since then, I have held well over 60 calls or meetings with parties interested in learning more about berdalimumab, following upon dozens of meetings earlier in the year at the BIO conference. And we are already providing materials to several interested companies under CDA. Many of these companies have some familiarity with berdalimumab, while others are new to the story. Although we have had a number of conversations regarding regional licensing arrangements, for example, in one or more countries in Asia, a regional deal is not our ideal choice because it will not bring in enough capital to really help the company improve its balance sheet. Accordingly, while we are pursuing those conversations in parallel, we are mainly focused on a U.S., Europe, or a global deal for all indications, or, if necessary, a deal for our lead indication, bullous pemphigoid. Based on our experiences and feedback thus far, I believe the best partnering candidates are mid-sized biopharmaceutical companies looking for assets in the dermatology or orphan disease space. We have already seen that it is the smaller, more nimble companies that can quickly engage and make a rapid assessment as to whether or not they wish to pursue in-depth due diligence. And large pharmaceutical companies tend to have longer processes and are less interested in bullous pemphigoid as a lead indication. We are running a structured and disciplined process to bring us a deal within the time frame that we have outlined. We have received several proposals from well-known partnering firms and are considering the best and most efficient path forward for the process. I want to make it perfectly clear to all of our shareholders that despite whatever rumors you may have heard, at no time has the company received a credible bid for any of its assets which it turned down. On the contrary, the company, including the board, has worked diligently to solicit bids and has spent a great deal of time assessing the validity of potential indications of interest from any reasonable third party for any of the company's assets. I cannot state it any more clearly. The company has not turned down bids for its assets. I know that every one of you is frustrated and angry over the stock price. I know very well that all of the progress that was made with berdalimumab over the past year and a half has not seemed to even slow the decline in Immune's market value. Even in the short time that I have been interim CEO, the stock has continued to decline despite further good news on berdalimumab. The financial overhang is significant and has been an immense burden on the stock, and missed expectations have also contributed to this problem. Over my time as interim CEO, I've tried not to sugarcoat anything, and I've been extremely forthright about the challenges facing the company. And since then, on virtually a daily basis, it has become increasingly clear to me that a berdalimumab transaction is the only chance to repair the cap structure and balance sheet of the company. I believe it is a partnerable asset, and I am very encouraged by the seriousness and thoroughness that several companies are already taking in their approach to due diligence. I am working tirelessly to do everything I can to get berdalimumab in front of a very large number of potential partners in the U.S., Europe, China, Japan, and Korea, whether their interests are in dermatology, orphan diseases, gastrointestinal diseases, asthma, or inflammation in general. Again, our goal is a global deal for all indications, but we won't wait for that if we have an opportunity to execute a significant regional deal or derm-only deal. Don't imagine that for any company looking at berdalimumab that this is a quick process, at least for those who are truly considering a partnership. It's easy to get a quick turnaround when the answer is no because the strategic fit or stage of development is wrong or there aren't yet enough clinical data. But getting to yes, a term sheet, for example, requires a lot of research, dialogue, queries, and diligence. We have thousands of pages of documents, animal and human studies, manufacturing data, regulatory filings that any serious party will review in depth while doing their own analytics on commercial opportunity and clinical development costs. I am not asking for patience. I understand full well that long-term Immune shareholders are long out of patience. I simply want enough runway to get a transaction that can get us to a cleaner balance sheet and a stronger financial position. And this is my goal. Thank you all for your time and for listening.
Thank you. This concludes today's conference. You may disconnect your lines at this time. Thank you for your participation.